is your purpose here? How many of you are there?
Welcome to Voyage of the Geek for another week. Joining me as always, Tom McGill, Dan Miller, and a big welcome back to the bench, Tony Oakton.
Hello.
Good to have you on board again, sir.
It's great to be here.
Found some time in between Ironman marathons and rewriting a brand new programming language for the world.
I'm not doing so much programming at the moment.
Aren't you?
No, I did do a half marathon this morning.
This morning.
Yeah, but the programming's taking a back seat to my.
It's important probably to note that we are currently sitting in a room, and outside it's only slightly cooler than the surface of the sun.
Yeah, it was pretty cold.
Where we are. It was 36 degrees Celsius here today, but at least we're enjoying some air conditioning and a couple of nice beverages. Today we're going to have a look at a little bit of a cult movie that became a cult after it did its cinema release, and it's a Jean-Claude Van Damme film. How this pans out based on that, we're not too sure, but we're going to have a look at the classic 1994 Timecop. Now, gentlemen, how did we find this film originally? Dan, did you see it in the cinema?
No, I didn't see it in the cinema. I never hired it on VHS, and I just had never seen it before. Now, yes, exactly. I'm very ashamed right at the moment. It's exactly the sort of film that I thought that I would have seen before, and video nights on Friday night. So no, I haven't seen it.
What about you, Tom?
Hadn't seen it. I do distinctly remember seeing the posters in the video shops, and I see the poster. I know when the film was out. I remember seeing it advertised at the cinema. I was never somebody who went and saw Van Damme films in the first place. Most action hero films I
French
stayed away
surreal
from.
films would be your thing, would it?
I don't know. I did not miss any Schwarzenegger films.
Yeah.
But I did not watch Stallone. I did not watch Van Damme. I did not watch any Dolph Lundgren or whoever else was around back in the days. I just genuinely, but I did not enjoy the Schwarzenegger films for him, but they were just genuinely the interesting films, going to Mars or going back in time and fighting being the Terminator. Those are films that I enjoyed. And Timecop I know seeing, but never felt the urge to see it.
I think I saw it. I definitely saw it. And I remember enjoying it and thinking it was a good film, which is kind of why I was surprised that we were doing it here. Because I don't think I've enjoyed any of the films that we've done.
It doesn't bode well if we're
film,
doing
I
it.
do remember watching it and enjoying it. It may have been at the university, because I was possibly at the end of my university. I did a PhD, and I did about 2 years of the PhD, then gave up. And it might have been in the final year of my PhD. The university had a film club where they showed recent releases. It was fairly cheap to get in. I probably went in and saw it then, probably not long after or before Pulp Fiction and those films, And I thought it was okay.
Was it the film you remembered when you watched it
was
recently?
I was worried because I thought, it's going to really age terribly and it's going to be embarrassingly awful screenplay. But actually, it's okay.
Yes.
It's not a bad film, in my opinion.
It's one of the better time travel films. There's some spurious science,
It's terrible. Well, yes, it's
which we'll touch on as we move through the film. There was certainly some spurious science and some things they decided to completely overlook and not mention and not even talk about. But as time films go, it didn't have a lot of those cliched treatments that we see where when someone is out of time, we have to put up with this language thing, where we're laughing at what it used to be called, or what this. You know, we looked at Demolition Man, and so many of the punchlines are about
Sort of cheesy humour.
yes, that and cashing in on that time displacement, the old ways or the new ways, or
It's only
that sort of
10 years difference at least. They do not the same actors in both time zones, very rarely aged.
Yes.
Little aged.
stuff. Yes, and
Few
this
extra grey hairs, a bit longer hair in the future.
there was some glorious mullets
Yeah,
in
better
this one.
hair in the future. Yeah.
And which mullets, certain mullets in this film aren't that out of time for today, because the mullet has made a glorious return.
Oh, they were glorious. Glorious Van Damme mullet.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
When was the mullet?
When wasn't the mullet? I think most of the 80s is mullet worthy, certainly from mid 80s all the way through to, I say, mid 90s.
Mid-90s. So in the mid-90s, they were going out of fashion, and they
Yes.
figured when we make this movie, we're 10 years, 2004, it must be back by then.
Yeah.
They'll come back in fashion. It'll
Yes.
come back in fashion.
All right.
And it's strange because hair is usually the thing that dates a film. Really, like you can get away with a lot of other things, but you can rarely get away with hairstyles. You can normally pick a decade by the hairstyles in film. This film for Jean-Claude Van Damme, The Muscles from Brussels, is one of those first films that were when he broke away from, and I forget the name of, what's the production house with the two Israeli producers that were specialists at the B-grade action films. A lot of Jean-Claude Van Damme's early
It's not canon that you're talking
Canon,
about.
we're talking about Canon films.
Yeah, okay.
So he was one of their tentpole finds. I think they discovered him in a restaurant or something like that. Where
Wasn't he a stuntman or something?
He was
like that?
one of his first films that he worked on. He was as a stuntman, yeah. Maybe not the first one, but he did start.
Yes,
stunt
Bloodsport,
supporter.
American Ninja. This was the production house that used to just put Ninja in the title, and then put numbers after them.
Yep.
And they were cranking out films. So the Canon film, they tapped into Charles Bronson, and there was another Charles. That was part of their, but then they found The Muscles from Brussels, and he made them quite a lot of money. But this film is him stepping away from that mechanism, and as a result, it saw a bigger budget. I got a feeling the $27 million budget for this film would have been 7 movies under the Canon banner.
Yeah, 27 movies.
Yeah, it was really quite crazy. They were. It was sheer repetition of process that they wanted is how they wanted to make their money. They had dreams of being respected in the industry, but unfortunately, because they just wanted to make a bulk number of films, they never really reached that degree of respect. It's a great documentary about Canon films, actually created by Wild Bear. It's a brilliant documentary talking about Canon films, and they were so outraged by that documentary that they went out and created their own documentary to document their own careers.
Counter documentary.
But it's a super interesting
Alternate
doco,
facts.
and it does talk a lot about The Muscles from Brussels. I think it's important to note that probably in Jean-Claude Van Damme's contract for every film is that he has to do the splits in some kind of
A certain number
Yes,
of times.
yes.
Just once doesn't count.
to the point that it became so renowned against his name that there's the famous TV commercial where he's doing the splits between the two trucks. And in this film doesn't disappoint.
Of course not.
Yes, and also the standing leg kick hold
Yep.
is often in every film as well. He also likes to get his kid off. Get down to his undies in every film as well, and he doesn't disappoint in this film. All of those have been ticked for this.
But he dispatches the villain using a kick.
Yes.
And he makes a self-reference about it, which is quite amusing.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so
Even at this point in time, this film already took it a bit with humor and starts the movie with 2 balloon creatures. You know, used cars when they go to the mall, they have these balloon people made out of helium balloons. Just 2 guys doing the splits, standing like this with their legs far apart.
I
That's
didn't
how
even
the
notice.
movie opens up.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
All right, so what we're going to do is take a deep dive. We have the spoiler meter wound up to about 11. It's not advisable to watch this show if you have ambitions to watch the movie and not know what's going to happen, because we're going to spill the beans. And what we like to do is use the narrative to sort of drive our progress through the process. And as we stop along the way, we'll talk about some of the trivia that might exist for the film, also some of the visual effects, which, generally speaking, weren't too bad. I was pretty impressed with some of the visual effects in the film. So Dan is our master of all things narrative. So where do we start with this one?
All right. That's a good question. Maybe starting with a log line, starting with some description of the story, particularly for people who haven't seen it yet, right? So there's going to be a bunch of people who don't know what's going on with the story.
Yep.
So a log line is like the smallest possible description of the story that you can produce in like one sentence.
So what elevator pitch sort
So
of?
it's the elevator pitch sort of thing. So does anybody have any good visions for what the log line should be? Usually you start with the word when.
When a heartbroken, what's a person who lost their wife? A widower. When a heartbroken widower cop gets the opportunity to set things right, he overcomes his hesitancy to not do so. The film is about him not doing the thing he could do, right? He lost his wife and he could go back in time, but he's too much of a righteous person, right?
Yeah.
So that's telling it from his point of view, but that doesn't sort of
It's
include...
a film about him.
It doesn't include the stuff about the bad guy, though. So you could say when an evil senator who wants to become president and take over the world, goes back in time to rejig the world events, a time-traveling policeman must...
That's a whole paragraph, Dan.
I'm trying to make it one sentence. All right.
Oh, you can make a long sentence for sure.
It's a long sentence. So essentially we've got a couple of different elements. We've got the time-traveling cop. We've got the evil presidential senator
Who's vying for presidential election.
who's vying for presidential election, and he's going to use time travel to try and
To buy airtime.
Yes,
That's his evil. That's his
to
evil
pay
plot.
for his election
That's right.
campaign.
Yes,
Yep.
to pay for his election campaign. Yeah,
He just wants exposure. That's all he wants. Wants the opportunity to talk to people.
and
What's the opportunity to put things right?
Yeah, and get
Which you could
voted
do using time
for.
travel, basically, by just going back in time and putting things right. But
Yeah.
no, he wants to raise money to go for a much more complicated...
It's a
Yeah,
really
yes.
complicated
Yes.
plan.
what did he want to do as president or whatever?
He wanted to be Donald Trump, basically. by
Yeah,
the sound of it.
yeah. He
But
wants
he
to
just-
be a rich person.
He just
in the
wanted
White
to be
House.
the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't want to do anything when he... I mean, what's he going to do when he gets... He's going to be
Was
like...
never said.
Yes.
Now what do I do?
Yes, there were no ambitions in anything else other than to have the power.
Well, he does say at some point we should have a super rich guy in the White House who's so rich he doesn't need to listen to anyone.
Yes.
And everybody doesn't like he can go to Mexico.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
That's
So
That's
that's
right.
exactly this foreshadowing.
So it was hinting at the rich get richer and the poor get poorer for some reason. That was his kind of motivation.
Yep.
I don't think he needs to go back in time to do that. That's happening. Unless the time travel actually has happened, which is why that's happening now.
We might be
Maybe.
living in a world where
Yeah,
where time
maybe,
travel.
yeah. Maybe that's...
They were
why
keeping it
everything-
secret. This the
Yeah.
time agency, right? The common person doesn't know time travel exists.
Yes, well, in this movie, they do actually detect when time travel is happening. So we'll kind of talk about that as they get to it. But I think we also need to just talk about the characters. So, who is the characters in this movie, and how many characters do we have? We have
We've got about 5 good ones. 5.
how many
slightly more.
mega main ones do we have?
2.
Two. There's the good guy and the bad guy. Yeah.
Yep.
And then there's a couple of other people that hang on and do stuff. So there's Max Walker.
Very American name. You would expect somebody with cowboy legs and a drawling
That's
American
right, the
Texan
leg
accent.
stretching time cop. All right, so yeah, Max Walker.
Max Walker.
Yeah.
Chewing gum, chewing, hard hitting
Chewing gum. Yep.
Yeah.
American
All of
guy.
Max is a great name to have. You know,
Better than Min.
because you can put a bunch of
Min.
you can
It's
Min
Min
Walker.
Walker.
Min
What's
Walker.
that tiny?
I heard about it.
Min Shuffler.
you can put a
That's
bunch of
his
stuff.
nemesis.
It's like having it's like being a major, right? You can
Yes.
put a bunch of stuff after it and sound super cool, like Max Payne.
Yes.
Or
Major Pain
yeah,
works just as well.
yeah.
So there's the corrupt politician is named Tim, isn't it?
Possibly.
I think his name is Tim.
Don't think
I've
his
always,
name's
I don't want to insult the Tims out there in the world, but I think Tim is close to the opposite of Max.
I'm not sure his name's Tim
I don't know. It's Macomb.
McComb. Yes.
I think somewhere they said his name was Tim.
I think
don't
so
know.
too, yeah.
I think his name's Tim. Then there's a couple of other hangers-on. So there's the police chief.
Yes.
Because he's a cop, so you got to have the police chief,
This is Matuzak,
Matuzak,
who is the director. He becomes the director of the
the
department.
Timecop
Yes.
department of
Director Matuzak.
What's the Timecop department called? They call it the
TEC.
TEC.
Time Enforcement
Commission.
something commission. Sure, why not?
Something like that. And then we have his wife. This is Max's wife. named
Yes.
Melissa. Right. And we have another person whose name is Sarah Fielding.
Yep. She's a time cop as well.
She's another. Yeah,
She's a internal affairs agent.
that's right. Because when the time cop who doesn't like the pencil pushers up at City Hall gets a bit uppity, they have to put the internal affairs onto him.
There's doubt about Max Walker, the main Jean-Claude's character, whether he also is gone dirty. So
Because
she
his
has to come in.
partner went dirty.
She has to come in and verify that he also hasn't gone rogue.
Okay, so how does the story start? I'm going to break the story up into just 3 parts. I think there's a beginning, middle, and an end. Sort of a first act, second act, third act.
But it's the time travel movie. These don't actually have to come in that order, do they?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's difficult. This movie, and I'm slowly going to get around to making my case that yes, this movie does move around a little bit. So it's a little bit difficult. But there's some opening stuff at the start that we need to talk about, specifically because it gets to a little tiny bit of backstory that sets up the context.
Yes.
And then it goes to the inciting incident, which is going to kick us off. So what sort of things happen in the backstory that we need to know that establishes
Well, the
what's
one
going on?
thing worth mentioning right at the very start of the film, it's the first sequence of the film, which I love, and it's the gold transport, the gold shipment.
So we're back in time.
We are now back in time.
So it's a time travel movie, and we start by going straight
American
back in time.
Civil War
Yes,
times.
and it's shot in pelting rain
Mm-hmm.
with a lone guy with a
Blocking the road.
tooth missing.
A black.
Yes, dressed in black, black hat, black coat.
Yes.
Standing in the middle of the road,
With this
blocking.
little sign on his back saying, I am the bad guy.
Yes, and he just politely. It is good. It's important to note that he was very polite with his road robbery, and he's confronted by, I'm going to say, about a dozen guys on horses escorting a stagecoach or some sort of wagon full of
Yankee or Confederate?
Confederate gold.
Confederate gold.
Yes. And he asks them for the money. And they say no. They pull their guns. And he mows them down with fully automatic Uzi type
Laser guided.
Uzi weapons, which were concealed under his long overcoat. And he did not, after firing about 250 rounds, killing everyone, hit one single horse.
Not just kills the humans. These
What
are
is it?
very
He's got those
well
laser pointers
Yes.
on the guns.
That's what it was.
Yes.
And as an opening sequence in a film, it kicks off the. Here's the gentleman here. Kicks off the film and introduces the level of violence and action that we're about to indulge in.
I would
The
like to
90s
point
level
out
of violence.
the missing tooth here. The dental care in 2004, where he's from, should be good enough. So they must have found, out of all the henchmen to send, they go, we need somebody to look a little bit like this. A bit. Who's missing a tooth? Maybe a false eye. Step forward for this mission.
Sent back in time.
Take your false teeth out and look a bit rough.
And this heist becomes pretty important to explain some of the motives of Tim.
Of Tim
McCone.
the evil Tim. Now, speaking of evil Tim, there is some sort of highfalutin. This is the next scene, the next little sequence. Highfalutin meeting with a bunch of senators and commissioners and
So we're now in 1994.
Department of the Treasury. Yes, we are now in 1994. So we definitely moved forward in time, but I just want to sort of highlight that I don't think it says in the movie that you're now in 1994.
No, we could be just a few. It's before the TEC gets started, so it could be a
Yes.
year or two before.
Yeah.
Yes.
But people who are now senators will still be senators in 1994, so it can't be that far off.
Yes.
And we're about to get a wheelbarrow filled with kind of exposition. Come on up, and they're going to be like, "Rrr, we'll just dump this here. Can I just dump this here?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So the backstory is what's going to happen here.
Yes.
That they've just invented time travel.
Yes.
Now let's move on with the plot.
Yes.
The
Okay.
guy
We
who
need to
tells
police
that.
it.
And they need to
Otherwise
police
bad
it.
things will do. Bad people will do bad things
Yes.
with it, and they'll make lots of money. So we need to
Yes.
have a police force. To,
True, that's what he said.
And the evidence that he presents as to why they're so desperate to have a police force to police it is that the gold, which we mentioned earlier, had just surfaced in the middle of an arms deal.
Yes.
And he then presents some examples of
Yeah.
why we need to police it.
So they've just invented time travel. Some science boffin is just like,
Some of the science is
Put it
included
together.
in this scene. What's some of the science that was expositionally included?
Science. Like,
Well, as far as time travel in this universe, what can't they do?
well, that's what
Oh, yeah,
we
good
should
lord.
perhaps discuss.
the
is
rules get
The
established.
Yes.
rules.
Yes.
The rules.
Exactly.
This is kind of where we're heading to. Okay, so what are the rules of time travel in this
I think
universe?
there's only two, isn't there?
We
There's
can't
only
go forward.
Two rules. We can't go forward because the future hasn't happened yet.
Uh-huh.
And if we go back, we change the present.
You're going to
So you mustn't do that either.
with devastating results.
Well,
And
that's
there-
the
there's
consequence of that's kind of
there's a third one then, and that two bodies can't occupy the
that's the third
same
one, yes.
space
You make that clear at the start.
and time at the same time. Yes.
okay. All right.
Yeah, and I learned something when I read up on the director, John Hyams. He has a habit of always, he does his own cinematography in most of his films, and he writes a lot of the scripts, the screenplays himself. And his wife's maiden name is Spota. And in honor of his wife's maiden name, every movie that he writes, he puts in a character who's called Spota.
Oh, really?
And that's the guy who does all the exposition at the start of this
okay.
film. He is
Yes.
Spota.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
He does a good job of presenting total contempt for politicians during that exposition sequence, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note that one of the politicians at that desk is Tim McCone.
The evil Tim.
And camera keeps cutting to him with shifty eyes every
Yes.
time he's
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about,
Yes.
people can go back and make lots of money.
And he goes, oh.
Yes. And we can read that the cogs start turning in his head.
All right, so we've just been talking about the time travel rules. Now, I think this is important. You can't have two things in the same place from the different times that are in the same place, something like that. And you can only go backwards in time. You can't go forwards in time.
Yes.
So when I was watching it, I was like, okay,
Yes.
okay. But if you go back in time,
If you're going to come back,
if you come back, don't you go forward in time?
Yeah, they immediately contradict themselves in the opening of the film.
yes.
So we should be helping these guys out as much as possible. So the
And
way
it's a-
that I have an addendum to the rule, and that is it's like a kind of a rubber band, like a
Yes.
sort of a
You
you're
can only
attached-
bungee into
yeah,
time.
Yeah, you can only bungee, right? So you go and then zoop. It's
Yeah.
okay to come back because that's not part of the thing, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
somehow.
But it's
Yes.
such an unnecessary rule. How about the addendum being get rid of the rule? No other movie needs that rule.
Yes.
It's completely unnecessary to say we can't go into the future because
You make a good
just
point.
That is a good point.
Yes. There was no need to even say that you
No.
can't go forward.
Yes.
Because why would you go forward? Like,
Well, you'd go forward kind of for the same reasons that Tim wanted to go backwards. You want to cheat and steal.
But there's no guarantee that anybody's there. Like an asteroid could hit next month.
But you could go forward 100 years and then steal, whack an old granny over the head, with a purse and steal $100 and then come back.
Get some futuristic technology that helps you in these days. But really, it just makes sense to go in the past and do a Biff Tanner.
Yes.
Which is what he sends.
Which is
his
what
people to do.
Tim's starting to come up with.
Yeah.
That a very idea.
Although really seriously, you should just play lottery last week and that'll do it. So he has all his henchmen to do that. It would
Exactly.
be much less
He knows the
criminal.
winner of every World Series.
Yeah.
Like
Just get an almanac and go back to 1984.
Yes, you don't have to be evil. You can just.
He doesn't need it.
I know. You just get the lotto numbers and you'll win all the money you want.
Yep.
Or invent something. Just go back and say, hey, look, I've just invented the microchip or something. Anyway, so those two opening things give us a taster of time travel. Mm-hmm. And then they show us that the TEC, the Time Enforcement Cops, has been set up. And, the other thing that I noted is, we're moving quickly with the story here. We're just like, let's just get all of that out of the way. Thank you very much. And now let's move on to the inciting incident.
yes.
So, the inciting incident is what kicks off the story, mainly for our protagonist. And there's a sort of a pattern that happens in the story. There's this bit that's at the home, and then we're going to kind of return to the home at the end of the story.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a kind of a little change in location in the middle, but then we're going to come back. So we're never going to stray too far from home. So he's at home. What's kind of going on at home? He's also down at the mall.
He's having sex.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
Yes.
after.
That was something I've not.
Yes.
That was something I do remember actually. As a film, it was quite hot. Actually.
Yes. It was pretty raunchy.
Jean-Claude Van Damme's
Raunchy,
bum
yeah.
right there,
Yes.
full
There
screen.
was-
Yes.
Fairly raunchy.
There was-
And
There
it was
damn butt.
it was certainly
in these days actually. And
answering the need of Jean-Claude Van Damme's contract to get the butt out.
Yep.
Yes, the butt was.
But we certainly start. We're introduced to the wife
yes.
at the mall,
down at the
And-
mall.
and the
like-
mall
like
becomes a little bit of a time.
Like so many time
loop
travel
as well.
movies, it has to show a room full of clocks.
Indeed,
Yeah.
Yes.
indeed.
And everybody has to, and I don't think they did this enough, but everybody has to make one-liners about time. It's like saying, just in the nick of time
Yes.
you arrived, and all
Yes.
this sort of stuff. So anyway, his wife's down there, and anyway, Jean-Claude Max Walker arrives.
At the mall.
Yep.
Yep.
And he essentially greets his wife, and they have a bit of a backwards and forwards, and then
Some PDA, some public display of affection. Some
Yes.
passionately.
quite gratuitous public display of passion.
Yes.
Yes, they have the.
And then he
they
sees a
have
roller
pash.
skater. He sees a roller skater just roller skating,
Yes,
Rollerblades.
Roller-
Tom.
rollerblading, whatever the kids were doing in the 90s.
Yes.
but he was going a little bit too fast.
That must have been
in
it.
the, so his cop detection was
sensors
like,
go off.
just passion with my wife here. Oh, hang on a minute. What's going on here?
Hold my beer.
Hold my beer. And it turns out that rollerblader was up to no good.
He was pinching purses.
And
yes,
so
from little old ladies.
he stands in the middle of the path, puts up his foot, and waits for this rollerblader to come closer.
Come closer.
He just, was he standing there for 5 seconds?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yep.
So he does the Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Which
one
ticks
foot,
the second box
one
from the
foot in your face.
Jean-Claude contract.
Yes.
Cool pose.
Yes, he gets the power pose with the 1 foot high in the air.
Yes.
Read it.
And what does it say on the bottom of his shoe that the guy has to read?
Wolverine.
Wolverine. And what does that mean?
It's a pair of shoes. I don't know.
I don't know. Does he buy those shoes specifically? It's like, I've got to buy some new shoes today. I wonder what's written on the bottom of these ones.
Got to clean the soles of my shoes before I go out because a lot of bad guys are going to be reading them.
Yeah, I've got a good idea.
They're a well-known brand of boot. It'd be like having redbacks on.
Oh, okay.
Right, and
Okay.
and you'd say read between
Product
the lines.
placement. Lots of
Right.
product placement.
It's a little bit of product
Nissan,
placement.
There's
Yes.
black chewing gum. There was lots of
Yes.
different product placement.
Yeah,
in this
they're
film.
decent boots too.
Okay.
They're pretty good.
So he saves the day, and old lady gets her purse back, and then do we have some sort of eerie music?
Well, we see
We do.
We see two henchmen.
Yeah.
We do see weird people with weird hairdos. So they're
Yes.
obviously they look very bad
Again.
and henchman-y.
Yes.
Yes.
And we know that it's a time travel film, and they look weird. So we assume that they're
Yes.
from the future, a future which they just a minute earlier said doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
But these guys are from that future that doesn't exist yet.
Now-
Did you interpret them as coming from the future?
Yeah, they're the guys that Tim
Yes.
sends from 2004 to kill him and blow up the house.
Ah, that's true. Okay.
Tony, if you were at the mall and you saw two guys that looked like these two guys staring at you, how'd you feel about that? These were pretty ominous looking. They were scary guys, weren't
The
they?
guys have weird sunglasses, didn't they?
And they walked.
They had a weird haircut.
Yeah.
He was dressed weird. He had motorbike boots with steel plates on the front of them, and he had a walk that was
It was
really
Aggressive.
aggressive.
Don't mess with them.
me.
They were. I thought the henchmen in the film were pretty good. They weren't. Too,
The characters generally were broadcasting really right from the start who they were. You know, Senator Tim, first time we see him, he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every henchman has either a scar on their face or
yes.
a walk that sounds like "Don't mess with me."
with the exception of one character, which we'll talk about when we
Oh,
get,
the backstabbing.
get to that sequence. No, the boss Mantuzak. They deliberately wrote into the script enough for you to question whether he was also in on it.
Whose side he was on?
Yes.
Oh, really? I
They
didn't.
played around with it a little bit, and we'll discuss it when we get to it. But you weren't 100% sure whether
There is
he,
a backstabbing reveal halfway through the film, which is a character that was not broadcast as
yes,
the bad guy.
yes,
Bad
So
person.
yeah, that is them breaking the mold a little bit, where they've got everything as obvious mustache twirling good guys or bad guys, and then there's one who's a secret one. All right, so just moving forward, they head back to their home.
have a snog.
They have a snog. There's we know that the bad guys are lurking around. I don't know what kicks off that, because there's going to be all sorts of. Oh, that's right. He's in the middle of snogging.
Yep.
He gets
Answer
a
the
call
phone.
from work.
Yes,
And he's like, oh, hang on, honey. And he just immediately goes for the phone. And the phone says, you got to come into work. And he's like, oh, shit, sorry, honey. I'm going to go into work.
And then she the classic old cliche of saying, "I have something to tell you," and he goes, "Oh, tell me later."
Yes.
And then you immediately know what's going on with her.
yes, and
She's
she
got-
begs him not to go.
Yeah, she's got 5 minutes to live, that means.
Exactly. And she'd had no time. Later on in the film, we know that she is pregnant and that she was actually meant to tell him this,
Yes,
urgently asked by his future self. But the entire ride home from the mall, throughout the foreplay, whatever they did in the bed, there's no opportunity.
She was
to say that-
saving up
to
for the
do what she was saying after. Yeah.
Perfect moment.
yes.
Perfect moment. But it didn't come, and he had to go out to work, and he goes outside, and some of the bad guys whack him over the head.
Yep, they get the drop on him. They shoot him.
They shoot
He's
him.
on the floor, and they shoot him multiple bullets to the chest.
Yes.
And
he's-
then they go into the house.
And they go into the house, and poor old Melissa, she's none too happy.
She's screaming in the window upstairs,
screaming.
getting shoved mercilessly,
around.
pushed around
By an
by.
ominous
What is
shadow
going
figure.
on there?
There's
Yes.
an ominous shadow figure.
Why is he doing that?
Yes,
I didn't
exactly.
really understand what he was doing at
Yes,
that point.
exactly right.
Because she was sort of in the window, exactly where the camera could see from
Yes.
outside.
But he's outside. Surely the whole mission was to kill him.
Yes.
Which they've done.
Mm-hmm.
So what were they? Why not just go?
Do not
What did
start
they need?
this. Do not
They
start
didn't need
this
to
in
do
this film.
anything.
There would be so many opportunities
Yes.
to ask why.
Yes, the narrative is only 3 centimeters deep on this.
They did
this
not
thing.
spend much time writing this film. Right?
Yes, it's very
They said,
shallow.
some words on a sheet of paper. Let's go film it.
Yes, go. All right, so that was the inciting incident. So actually, what was going on there? So a bunch of people turned up from. My perspective when watching the movie was, a bunch of people turned up and beat him up and shot
then,
him.
Then he went back to being a policeman and carried on doing his job.
And then he turned back into a policeman
Why
and
don't
was
they
just
go
went and
back
did
in
his
time
job
and
again.
Do it properly because they
Yeah.
know that they failed.
They failed.
So they could have
Yes.
just gone back the next night and just done it
Or
properly.
go
Yes.
back when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could have kept going back until they got it right.
Yeah.
So think about time travel.
Yeah.
Just don't. You can't question it. No, I don't, no.
Plot hole city.
So I was still a little bit lost, to be honest with you, that those were people who'd come back in time from... Because ultimately, only after you study the film intensively do you realise that Tim has sent those people back to... Why did
To
they...
kill him.
Why?
That's the
But
whole
why?
Because he.
Because he
they
gets in
knew
his
the
way.
they knew in the future that he was
Max Walker
going
becomes
after
his
Tim.
nemesis. He wants to get his nemesis out of the way. It costs him too much money in election money.
So, Max Walker is like on the case, and he's like suspicious of old Tim,
Not when he gets shot,
No,
not
that's
when he
right.
gets
but
killed.
not when he gets shot in this inciting incident.
Yes.
But if we have this top view that there's timey-wimey and everything's going on, my point really here is, when does Max Walker ever work out that Tim is the bad guy?
Dan,
Okay.
I think you're probably wrong in assuming that this is the inciting incident.
No, there's...
Because this does not set Max Walker off into the film, into
Yes.
the journey. He was already going to join the TEC.
That's right.
And he gets up and does exactly what he was going to do anyway. So the fact that his wife was killed
Yes.
is not setting up the film in any way. It is really just showing that he has, and this is, I think, an important character point, is that this is a guy who lost his wife. He is just joining a time travel
Yes.
agency where he's access to time travel. And
But he
because
can't.
he has moral and he's a good guy, he cannot go
Yeah.
back in time to prevent the murder of his wife.
He finds out about McCone when he goes back to Wall Street and to apprehend his ex-partner. His ex-partner, Atwood,
Okay.
names McComb as the person that sent him back.
Okay. Let's then move forward a little bit in the story to perhaps what's, I suppose, the middle act of the story. And yes, I take your point that this might not be the inciting incident. It's very hard in this movie to work out what bits are first, for example, or second, or what's going on, kind of. So anyway, all right. So, but we're getting there. We're putting this
Because-
together. We're cracking this.
What's the hero's journey? If he's our hero, what does he change? He
I
does
tr-
change from a moral, law-abiding person. He still is that at the end, but he does take the opportunity to fix his wife's murder when the opportunity presents itself to him. It lands in his lap.
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything to
doesn't fit-
make it happen.
It doesn't
but
fit the
it's sort
hero's
of-
journey. It's
No,
not
it
the
doesn't.
hero's
No,
journey.
it doesn't. He is still. He doesn't change.
No.
He's the same guy.
Well,
he
this-
just
Yes, this
Yeah.
is another point about the film, the character development story arc of the character. He's Max Walker at the beginning.
yep.
He goes back in time and he's still Max Walker, and then forward in time and he's still Max Walker. In the middle and the end of the story is also Max Walker.
He's actually a little bit more creepy and bad at the end. But we'll get to that at the end.
All right. All right, so what's the middle bit of the story?
He goes back in time to the 1930s, is it?
1920s
Yes.
and 1930s.
1929.
Yeah.
30th.
Stock
Depression.
market crash.
Yep,
It was the
exactly.
Stock market crash. People
Yeah.
jumping out of windows. Not dissimilar to Russia now.
Falling out of windows accidentally over in Russia. Do you know that there's a word for that?
Yes.
What is it?
Defenestration.
Defenestration. Thank you very much.
Defenestration, yeah.
All right. So somebody has just been potentially defenestrated and fallen out of a window, and we zoom in on somebody who's doing some stock market stuff, but they pull out like a Sony Walkman. All right, and this is 1920s, so they're doing stock market bets.
Puts a mini disc,
Yes,
which
right.
was
futuristic.
still around in 1994.
I had one of those.
Yeah, I have a few. And listens to that, and also grabs out a weird futuristic gun that I think they leave on the crime scene at the end when they jump out of the window, right?
Yeah,
I think that gun gets left behind in the 1930s.
He had his little Max Walker when he turned.
And the Walkman.
He was
by the
putting
way.
all of the apparel
And the
in his
Walkman,
little
yes.
bag, but he
I
might have
was collecting some of
he
it.
might have
Yeah.
left the gun.
So just so Max Walker turns
Oh,
up.
that's right. He runs around the bag. Yeah.
Turns up and he's going to flash his Timecop badge to
Yes.
this guy who's doing bets.
Yes.
But then randomly, it turns out that it wasn't just any old person; it was his ex-partner.
That's right.
Yep. He's been on to him.
Yep.
And I would like to pay attention to the fact that Max Walker's entry is, I think, the first time we see the time warp. The run
wobble,
yes,
wobble,
right? The
wobble.
wobbly
Time wobble.
So we
Yes.
see the room distort, and out of the distortion, walks out Max Walker.
Yes.
Yes.
What do you think of the visual effect for the
Oh,
time
I'm
effect?
sure for 1994 they were probably very proud of it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It was reminiscent of some of the effects we were seeing in Terminator 2 and Abyss. Yeah. Yep.
That's what they were going for, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway,
on a smaller
so he's essentially going to arrest this guy. Okay, so and you reckon this is where Max Walker finds out about
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
The evil Tim.
He puts the pressure on Atwood, his partner, his ex-partner.
He also does a lot of collateral damage back in the 1930s, which he does not set right.
Yes.
Smashing people up, breaking bones.
Yes.
jumping out of a window with hundreds of people watching, going, "Dear Mother of Mary!"
But then they go back in time and fix that.
Yes, they do too.
They take Atwood back and let him crash to the pavement, which is a man from the future who has no business dying in the 1929 pavement.
It is a crazy.
There's no reason
So-
to. Anyway,
We'll
yeah,
touch on that,
we'll
but
get to
yes.
that.
Just for people who haven't watched this at home, the lucky people who haven't watched this at home, so it turns out that the what's Atwood? Is
Atwood,
that,
yeah.
okay, so that's the person he's going to arrest. Atwood,
Yes.
basically wants to commit suicide because it's all going to be horrible and things are going to be worse, and evil Tim is going to go back in time and do horrible things. So he says, "I'm going to jump out a window," and he jumps out a window.
Yep.
He's
and
going to
good
kill
old-
his family,
They were gonna
his
kill his
grandparents,
family.
and his cat.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's his way to solve the problem, but old Max Walker's not having a penny of it.
He wants Atwood to testify. He wants
Yeah.
to bring him back
That's right.
and testify at his trial.
So what's his solution?
Jumps after him,
Jump out a window.
catches him.
And
And
they're falling down together.
As they fall down, they go through the time warp
Yes.
and back into the weird train that they use for time travel. I
Yes.
Yes. Now, how do you go when you're falling at like at terminal velocity to be like, "Oh, pop! I'm on a train now."
No, I think that's what they need because in order to do time travel, they need to reach the time, right? They
this is a
leave.
bit-
I think they have to come back at high speed as well.
Okay. This is how science works.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mind you, you've got one falling body out of a window and another one that jumps after it. How does the second
catch you
person
before.
catch the first person?
Yes, that's a good point.
Wasn't that in Men in Black or some other film where you have to reach a certain? I mean, obviously in Back to the Future they have to reach a certain speed.
Yeah.
But they can't just do that driving a car. But I do remember that in Men in Black you had to jump down jump off a really, 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 really high building to go back in time as well.
Yeah.
And he almost bungee jumps into
yes.
Tyrannosaurus Rex mouth.
Men in Black 3.
Yeah, it's the third one.
Yes.
They needed velocity to do the time travel.
Yes.
But not in this film because the bad guys can just walk. They just press a button and they just walk through the wobble.
Yeah, and
right.
somehow end up back inside the capsule of the thing on the tracks with the rocket out the back of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
So then you need a rocket to go, but
Yes.
you just press a button to go back. It's just like undo.
don't-
It's
just
like
don't think
Control
about it.
Z.
Yeah, it's bungee. Bungee jumping.
It's
It is.
bungee.
Yeah.
Bungee technology.
It shoots you into the past.
And then pulls you back into the garage.
And
Time
sometimes it
bungee.
places you exactly in the room where you want to be. If you're the bad
Yeah.
guys, and if you're the good guys, you get dumped in front of a driving truck
Yeah,
or in
right.
front of a lake,
Lake.
or just all over the place.
Yeah.
All right. So when they get back, old Atwood has to go get. He has to go to court.
Yeah.
Gets found guilty, and gets sentenced to death
Right on the spot.
Yeah.
right on the spot.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're not mucking around.
No. So yeah, instant death, and they decide what would be the most fun or craziest way to
What's
kill
the
this
most
guy.
ridiculous guy? Let's send him back in time to smash on the pavement in 1929.
So he goes back in time and falls the rest of the way down, and then smashes onto the.
And then there's the policeman
Yes.
who already had a few close-ups, and we saw him earlier. I thought he might be an important person because why does a police guy who is just a no-face in this film get
Yeah.
two speaking roles?
I thought he was the doorman.
No, he's the police guy.
That's right,
And he
because he was
says-
there from the previous jumper.
The previous one, and then they see Max Walker and Atwood fall down, and then go through the time warp because, Holy Mother of Mary, or
That's right.
something. And then Atwood falls the rest of the way, and he says, "Oh, tomorrow." What does he say?
Tomorrow might have been
Poor
a brighter
guy.
day.
Yeah, tomorrow might have been. There's no reason for that at all,
And
unless
it's-
this guy was the cousin of the director or
Yeah.
something. But I looked it up, and I could see no connection to
It's
it.
implied that people are jumping daily
Yeah.
Mm.
They
in
were
Wall
jumping
Street.
question, yeah.
All right. So we're in the middle of the story, and we've just had sort of Timecop go on his first arrest, sort of. So
That
that's
we
like
see, yeah.
That we see. So that's like the sort of prelude.
And he now knows that Senator McComb is sending people back to make money.
Yeah. Now there's a kind of a meeting with the old senator. Senator turns up at Max's workplace,
Yes.
at his job.
Yes.
You know, and he's just like wandering around, and they have one of these discussions where it's like, "Do you know that I know that you know that I know that you were
Yes.
Tim?" And Tim says, "Yeah, I know." And yeah.
Yes.
Everything's out in the open. There's no.
And McComb finds out that
Surprises.
he has no evidence because Atwood is now dead and didn't come clean at his hearing. But McComb now knows that only Walker knows.
Yeah.
And therefore, Walker needs to die eventually.
But he's already been attacked because it's a time movie, so it's
Yeah.
back in time that he's been attacked. But the
But the
But the
decision,
senator wouldn't have known that because he
No.
hasn't sent them back yet.
he makes that later in the
he's
movie.
about-
he
yeah.
sends them on that mission, which we saw at the start of the film.
Yeah.
all right. So if you're confused at home, this is how it's
Honestly,
supposed to be.
I was not. By that point in time, I had just stopped thinking about it. There was nothing made sense, and
Yes.
at those points, I just
right.
turn off, and I'm not confused because I don't even try to.
I
Because
was.
there's-
I
Just
was
focus
starting-
on the mullets and the high.
yeah.
focus on the good
geeks.
things.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so let's just move a little bit quickly. There's a kind of a scene where the evil Tim is in his robot car, and he's doing evil things, and we get a little bit more exposition. But tell me, what's your impressions of their robot cars that they have in the future?
I want cars with doors, but you press them and they go. I'm very disappointed I don't have cars with electric doors.
I was
Let's
disappointed
win
that they have electric cars that drive themselves but don't have windows.
Yes,
Yeah, what
there's
is
no
that?
windows
That
on
window,
it.
yeah,
It
that-
just looks like a tank.
You are literally in a box.
It looks like
Looks
they
like
just
a
have
sort of a
body armor.
plastic Tupperware.
And it also looks like they could only afford two of them.
Yeah. Yes. So they're, to say the least, they're a little awkward in terms of their design, I feel.
Very much.
Yes.
A little awkward.
Yes.
And I wonder if they designed them for this film, or if did they have that lying around somewhere else from some other.
Leftovers.
Yeah.
Yeah. From a parade that happened last
Because I read
week or
on
something or
IMDb
other.
that the director did reuse some locations and sets that he used in other films that fans of his movies would recognize in other films. So I wonder if the same goes for
Might
the
be,
cars.
Okay,
Don't
so,
know.
so let's move into kind of the middle of the movie where there's a big action sequence. Now, what has happened is that Max Walker has now teamed up with the kind of teamed up with the person
He was burdened
that's
with.
burdened with
Yes.
Sarah Fielding.
Wasn't there
Yep.
where somebody broke into his apartment?
There was this. Yes, that's a good scene. He gets told to go home by Mantuzak.
Oh yeah. Tim throws his henchman's nose into the car, gives him a nosebleed.
And then decides, no, we got to take out Walker because he
That's
knows
right,
too
and
much.
they try to kill him in the now, in the today.
That's right, and in his apartment, this is where we get to see the splits up on the kitchen bench.
Oh, there's another
couple.
fight.
There's a couple
Okay.
of splits
Yes.
in this one,
Yep.
and the lamest knife fight I've ever seen.
Yes.
There's lots of moving of arms around.
Yes.
Whereas Van Damme just stands there holding the one knife.
So
Does this-
people at home trying to make sense of the story is we've just got another excuse for a big fight scene.
Yep.
Yes.
Is really what's happening now.
Yes.
Sorry,
some
Tom.
goons.
You were demonstrating the fighting techniques
The fighting
of the
technique.
movie.
Oh, before we have to go back just a little bit before because there's more showing about the Max Walker and his poor life because he sits at home drinking alcohol, watching old
Home movies.
old
of his wife.
Birdhouse.
Birdhouse.
well
Yep.
sex tapes. He's watching sex tapes. I think he's masturbating. He's filming her building the birdhouse, and then he puts the camera down, walks over to her, and
That's
they get
right.
it on the lawn.
Yes, you're right.
And nobody
camera.
turns off the camera. So he's watching whatever happens next. We don't get treated to what he watches.
No, we don't see it, but it's
But
implied.
he
Yes, you're
is-
right.
That
of
is
course.
exactly in there. That's what he's watching. He's watching himself and his wife having sex.
And
in the
he's
evenings
also
while
kind of
drinking alcohol.
and he's also kind of miming what I'm not miming. He's like reciting
Yes.
his own lines
Yes.
in,
That's
in
right.
his
Yes.
own thing.
Well, he
Not
only
healthy.
plays one
In his own
tape.
movie.
It isn't a healthy thing to do.
He's only got one
probably-
tape. Like he tells the TV to play tape. So he's only got
Oh,
one
it's
tape.
got the one. All right.
Yes,
right.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Just watches
It's on
it
loop.
on loop.
There's more, I don't know. Starting to get a little bit more
Anyway,
respect.
it's not the only masturbation scene that we see that we will get treated to in this film.
Yes.
But so after that, he's exhausted, and
I think it is the only one.
well, there's also
the
the
guy in VR.
the
Yeah.
VR guy.
That's pretty,
Um,
pretty.
Well, what was he up to?
pretty
Do you
cool.
think?
Well, he's definitely doing that, but that is a kind of a pretty. I mean, films about the future often get the future wrong.
Yeah.
But VR and
VR
is a big
is-
thing. It's,
Yeah.
They got it
nailed
right.
that.
They got it right. Well,
Yes.
this is yeah.
So we'll talk about that bit perhaps in a second. Finish your thought on the.
Yeah, so Max is exhausted after a good whatever he did, and then he's lying on the sofa asleep in a drunken stupor, and he feels the heat of a laser
That's right.
laser pointer on his chest, which makes him wake up and jump to the ceiling or somewhere, just in the nick of time.
But it's not just any old weapon, is it?
No, it's a taser. It's a laser taser.
How many volts did they say? Is 20,000? There was.
They said
I think he
something.
said something.
Yeah.
The henchman
Some ridiculous number.
threatened some massive
yeah.
amount of volts, so that we got a sense of pending doom.
So, yeah, strangely, he wakes up just before the guy shoots him and he moves out of the way at the right time for no reason at
answer
all.
machine, when he walks in the door, originally the answer machine says, and when the henchman walks in, the answer machine says,
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah.
He was woken by the automated.
It was, yeah, I know what you guys are trying to do. You're trying to defend the movie, but, you know, it was a little bit like, spider sense detects bad guys.
Pretty much.
I think Tony's right. I think there was logic.
No,
they
Tony
brought
is right.
logic to that.
To be fair, there was a beepy noise.
Yep.
There's a bit of logic there.
There was a bit of.
Not an
So-
awful lot, because this guy could have killed him and then been done with it, instead of which he spent a bit
It
of time
might have
doing
been one of the few logical moments in the film.
So there is a frenetic knife fight, which I think the editors of the film were probably doing more of the fighting
Yeah.
than the
Yes.
actual
Yeah.
people in the film.
I have to say that for all the fight scenes in the film, I found them badly choreographed, staged, and badly edited. Because if you do, John Van Damme is a martial arts, he's a karate guy, right? So he could have just fought it out. They film it with multiple cameras and then do an exciting edit. But because he has to show the splits and because he has to show the high kick and he has to do all these choreographed moves, they just take the two actors, hold each other, go into pose, roll camera, and then they do the thing. And then that's done. That goes into the edit, and then they set up for the next shot, and you can see that.
I think it's.
You can see that in the fight scenes that they have a lack of energy.
I think
because
it's
they're
a victim of the time as well. I think a lot of films of that day were very contrived, very. They weren't. I think a lot of the smart camera angles and fight choreography and the way sort of martial arts films were being shot in other places in the world took a bit of time to be brought over.
1994. I mean, Jackie Chan films were
far
advanced already at that. Yeah.
even Bruce Lee films were,
Exactly.
so that culture they knew how to do a fight sequence, but it took a while for it to come over to the States. And then when you started to see Jet Li and guys like that turn up in mainstream Hollywood movies, a lot of their stunt guys came over with them, and we started to see some really impressive fight sequences in the early 2000s. But in the 90s, we were still, seeing this sort of stuff where it was all about the splits and blood sport and those sorts of things, where it's all about holding the pose and growling at the camera and things like that.
Anyway, Van Damme holds the knife like this. He finds a kitchen knife. He grabs that, I think. Or does he take it off the bad guy? I don't know. I remember a shot where he looks over to his kitchen knife and there's an onion with a knife sticking in it because that's what we do before we...
That's what we do in kitchens.
And he just stands there. He stands. There's some shots where he stands like this, others like that, and I think it's just the edit that cuts between them.
It is
and the bad guy furiously bashes onto that knife.
Yes.
The little tiny wee little 10 centimeter knife blade.
God help the sound guy that had to put in the 4 million, because nothing was actually happening. Tom's right. Like Jean-Claude would stand there with the knife, and the other guy's waving his arm around like this, and I thought, kick him in the balls.
He's trying to kill the knife, not John Claude. All right. So there's a big fight scene.
So he dispatches that first guy, and then there's the second guy who then has patiently waited in the side.
Yes.
And then once his buddy is dispatched, then he himself. And during the fight, some water spills on the kitchen floor.
Well, the bad guy with the knife gets accidentally zapped by the other henchman that has the zapper gun.
I should have waited.
And that's what throws Walker backwards and lands on the kitchen floor, and the water is spilling towards Walker, right? And as the henchman reloads his electric gun and is about to dispatch Walker.
And then from a lying position,
Yes. Jumps up,
vertically jumps into the...
does the splits across the kitchen bench, just in time as the electric probes go into the water, which has only just reached the toes of the henchman, and blasts him and zaps him and kills him. So,
Zaps him to death. Yeah.
yeah, Walker 0, henchman 2, down for the film.
Double 0.
Yes.
All right. What happens next? The big fight in the middle of the film.
Oh, well, now he goes to work, right? Now he goes to work and gets burdened with
Sarah
Fielding.
Yes, who turns up at his apartment, and she doesn't like he. She turns up when he's throwing.
Yeah.
Was he throwing a dead guy through his door, or was he still alive? I think he was still alive,
He
wasn't
throws
he?
somebody out of the door while she's coming up.
Pretty
the
sure
stairs.
he says arrest them or something, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Got a feeling the guys weren't dead. Now, if they weren't dead, there wasn't much of a weapon they took to kill Walker, right? But yeah, he throws an unconscious guy through his perfectly good door, smashes the door to pieces right in front of her, who Jean-Claude's character has no idea who she is or why she's there. And that's how they're introduced to one another.
All right, and it turns out that she's sort of there to investigate him.
That's right.
Right, to keep him on track. And there's another big sort of arrest investigation thing that they're about to do,
Yes.
and she has to tag along.
Now, how do they know about these? Is there a system, Tony, in the film that tell the time cops?
Yeah.
What,
The guy explains it at the beginning. When you travel through time, you're throwing a stone into the water and it creates ripples.
yes.
And they can detect those ripples.
Yep. And then they've
It's
got a
all
rating
explained
system, don't
perfectly
they?
Logically, yes, they do. Yeah.
That like a ripple can be a small ripple, and then and it almost immediately can become a bigger ripple.
Absolutely.
So they're about to go to this warehouse.
They've detected a ripple.
So is that how they do it? I can't remember.
I believe that's exactly how they do it.
detected a ripple.
Yes.
Yep, that's right. So they get in their sled. Now, this is the other thing I wanted to point out, because they've got these rocket sleds,
Yes.
This is the time launching
Yeah.
rocket sled.
but they don't have wheels.
No. No.
Apparently,
They've got no friction device whatsoever.
they just slide along a metal which generates sparks.
Sparks everywhere.
It's a very inefficient way of doing this. I
Yes.
think at least have rollers or
Yes.
some sort of maglev.
Maglev,
or
yeah.
Something.
It looks
And-
like it's ready for maglev, doesn't it? The system.
And they've got this
The wall.
sort of time warp thing which they have to go, and immediately after that,
Yeah,
there's
that's
a
right.
plate.
There's
Yeah.
a concrete wall.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Thick,
You would think
thick, just
they would
there.
have like a, I don't know, maybe work
A
on the
net
safety.
or something?
After it, you would have some
Yeah.
rubber.
Yeah, or make it a little bit longer. I mean, why not extra 50
Yes.
meters? No,
Yes.
big
Look.
concrete wall.
Look, guys,
You either make it or you don't.
It's definitely not NASA approved.
there was limited space in the time travel
Bunk
warehouse.
Then you put cushions
It's-
there.
look,
or
it's-
bungee. Not a
you know, it's only you can't make it any shorter.
Yeah.
You know, and they just had to put it somewhere.
Yeah, and the bloodstains from the people who didn't make it themselves out. They've not got
Yes,
that.
they didn't clean those up either.
Get some GIF or something.
They thought it was-
Wipe them down,
They left it as a memorial
Yes, they did.
to poor old
The Borma twins.
the Borma twins. Yes. All right, so they go back in time, and I don't know, what do they expect? They're going to go to a factory thing, and they're going to do some sort of arrest, but they only send 2 people. They don't send like a SWAT team or anything.
I put this down to very logical reasoning by the filmmakers, Dan.
Few, lucky. I
If you
was
send
getting
more
worried
people,
there.
you
Okay.
increase the chances of damaging the future.
Yeah. Collateral. You must
okay.
avoid collateral damage to the
It's
warehouse.
obvious. It's obvious
Too
when
many
you think
ripples.
Yeah.
Too
It's
many
obvious.
ripples spoils the broth.
And I've reached that conclusion because of the track record of the filmmakers up until this point.
Yes.
Right, that they must have factored that in as the reasoning.
Yes, exactly.
Very
There would have been
carefully, yeah.
there would have been writers' meetings.
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
where they talked about that. Okay, so they're going to go to this this factory, and
They only have a location. They don't know what's going on there. They just know that there's shenanigans, that is time
ripple shenanigans are
ripple
happening.
related,
Right.
there, and they can
Right.
hone right in on it, but they don't know what they're going to find until
Okay.
they get there.
So one goes in one door, one goes in the other door.
For a reason that I can only explain by wanting to show the actresses' nipples, they do not go and send them to the warehouse. But they dump them over a lake.
Yes,
Yes.
they
For
land in
no,
the-
and they just land in the lake. They go to the
Yes.
shore as if it's the normal way. That's just how we do
The
it.
Potomac, I think it is. Is that the river in Washington, the Potomac River?
Yeah, I think it must be.
Because I think there's the Great Hall is in the
Yeah,
background.
yeah, they landed in the water.
There's no reason in there.
No, and
Why
I-
should the good guys not be capable of sending more pinpoint accurately?
yeah.
And how did they get out of the sled?
I don't know. Nobody explains.
What happened to the
The
sled? Did the
sled
sled go back in time as well?
Well, the sled waits for you because it takes you back.
I think the sled has to go back in time as well because otherwise it hits the wall.
I know. Yes, if the sled.
It's in limbo. It must be in
No,
a,
and
in
you
a-
see later on
It
the
does go
sled
womp,
goes
womp, womp,
into
womp.
the time.
It does
Maybe
too.
it's still up in the sky and it
It's
just
in
like
the-
ejects
yeah.
you out.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like got a ejection
it's
seat.
waiting in a timeless limbo until you're ready.
Until you hit the button.
Yeah.
That's the bungee mechanism.
Yes,
See?
it pulls you
And
back to
then
the
zoom,
sled,
comes
and then
back.
the sled comes back.
And it turns around and
Also-
comes back this way.
Here's the thing I've just realised. The sled that the good guys use only takes 2 people.
Yep.
But 4 of the bad guys get sort of sitting on each other's knees. Or something, or they're-
Because they only have one return box as
they all-
well.
they all
Yeah,
crammed
and
in
that's the
same
prototype. They're
sled.
using the prototype. The prototype was more advanced than what the TEC is
Yeah.
using.
Which is another plot thing that they just spring on us midway through the movie. Oh,
Yes.
by the way, there's another time machine.
Yes.
It's a prototype, and the bad guys are using it. Let's move on. Part 2.
Common sense will tell you that that's the case because they are the time cops are the only people that have got the machine, so it must be linked somehow to the guy that created the original time machine.
Well, the time cops were founded in order to prevent people messing with the timeline. So
Yeah.
they can't be the only ones having the machine.
Yes.
It's surprised that halfway through the film, the boss says, "Oh, how do they travel back?" And then Walker says, "Oh, the prototype must still be there." That's the whole point of the time police to prevent people. So there must be other people doing the time traveling.
Yep.
Shouldn't you just go and like pull the cord out of their time machine?
Exactly. Go back to last week, over there where that thing is.
And that's the ridiculous reasoning that the senator gives on his visit. He says, "Oh, we're shutting this down because instead of repairing time damage, we're just going to forbid it."
I'm starting to see
But
holes.
he can't
starting to see
forbid.
holes.
It's the Russians are doing it, the Germans are doing it, and everyone else
Hey.
is.
The problem is
It
that
makes
time
no
travel
sense.
is impossible.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
We know it's impossible because any time travel would cause paradoxes, would cause the universe to
course.
disintegrate. So time travel, so any movie about time travel is going to have plot holes in it.
Yes.
Of course.
Yep.
Of course.
can't make
But
it
some
time.
do it better than this one. Where they just say, we founded this organization to prevent time travel, and by the way, we're the only ones who can do it? That's just bad writing. Sorry.
And it turns out that they're not the only ones that
No.
can do it. There's active other people up the street who are doing it.
And they can't be the only ones either.
So
And
what
in
are
fact, this was turned into a TV series, and I never saw the TV series. It was a short-lived television series,
No,
but
I
I'm
didn't.
sure that
I wasn't
it
aware of
is
that.
something that was. Well, there was a second part planned, which Jean-Claude Van Damme did not want to do. I think it was still done in 2008, I think, and there was a short-lived TV series made out of it. So I assume that every episode deals with a different bad guy who also has a time machine. So there must
Okay.
be more of them around.
Yep.
All right, so we're in this big factory. What's the factory making, by the way? Because this is kind of
Computer
important.
chips.
It's making
yes.
computer chips.
Yes.
Now, earlier on, the senators mentioned the something or other billion-dollar computer chip that allowed time travel to be possible.
Yes.
So these are the time travel computer chips, right?
Yes.
And this is the factory that makes them.
Probably not the time travel chips, because this is the senator in his in his 1994 stage, being partnered up with a guy who makes the chips, invented them, and the senator is funding it, and he wants out, so he wants to be bought out. So the computer chip guy
Well, those
has a
chips,
check.
those chips are at the core of the time
They
travel
are-
technology, though, because the logo is actually on the side of the wall next to the time machine, originally without McComb's name there. So,
Oh, it has got his name on it.
no,
It's
Yes.
his company.
not when they first go back and they talk about the Borma twins' blood stains on the
Yeah.
brick wall. It's the original name, not the McComb.
Oh, it
not-
says McComb on it. It
no,
does.
no, I don't
When
think so.
their first visit, there's a big white limo parked in front of it. It says Senate on the.
when they come back, when he comes back and history has changed, that's when McComb's on it, because you've got to remember they go back to actually McComb goes back himself to stop himself from selling.
So I'm selling because it's his own company.
So the
That's-
original
there his name is on it.
future, McComb has sold out
Well,
of that.
Original future, but in 1994, when they visit the factory, the
Yes.
factory has McComb's name on it because
That's
it's
right.
McComb's factory.
Because he
That's what
hasn't
I'm saying.
sold it yet. Yes,
Because he hasn't sold it yet.
but Walker left the future to come back and stop that event. It's the original guy's name on the side of the computer stuff, not McComb's. But when he comes back, McComb's name's on there.
All right.
Because he convinces himself not to sell the chips. He also shot the guy in the brain that
Who was instrumental in making the
In
chip
ma-
and giving him the money?
yes. Yes.
Again, what the hell were the writers thinking here?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, so this is kind of where it gets complicated for those listening at home. You know how we talked about there were characters in this film and we kind of named, there's Max and there's Tim? There's kind of not just Max or Tim. I was sort of toying with the idea of asking you guys, do you think that these characters are one-dimensional characters? And the answer is yes, of course.
Yes, of course.
Right? They won't. But they're not. They're two-dimensional characters because there's multiple versions of these characters throughout the whole movie. There's two Tims. And there's two Maxes.
Yes.
There's the future Max and the past Max.
Yes.
And the future Tim and the old Tim and the new Tim.
So there's Snivelling Weasel, early Tim, and then there's badass slamming his assistant's faces
Evil Tim.
Evil Tim later, Senator Tim.
And this is one of the instances where the two Tims end up in the same room.
Yes.
And there's a rather nice visual effect, special effect, where one of the Tims walks a complete circle around the other Tim.
Yeah, that's nicely done.
Yeah. So the two Tims are in the room, and then later we're going to have the two Maxes, but it doesn't stop there, and we'll get to that in a second. But what's the basic thing? There's going to be a big fight scene that happens in this factory, right?
Yep.
My impressions of it is, again, science.
Yes.
They use all of the forces known to science in this fight.
Yes.
There is heat, there's fire, there's cold,
Explosive chemicals.
explosive chemicals, there's electricity,
Yes.
there's gravity. They've just pulled out all of the science things,
Yep.
and they're using it to kill people.
Yes.
There's a really nice idea, which I thought was where he's driving the forklift. He's being
You got to
shot at.
explain. You got to explain the forklift.
So the forklift is Max's shield.
You
He's
gotta-
hiding behind
Two
the forklift.
barrels of what?
Some flammable explosive stuff.
Highly-
What is he hiding
I
behind?
don't
Yes.
know what it is, but it is explosive.
Wait. I think we need to give a bit.
Does it say
more
something
context.
on it?
Yes.
In a gunfight, what is he hiding behind?
What does it say?
He's hiding behind barrels of like
Highly flammable.
flammable petrol.
In fact,
it's
it
something
explodes,
that
doesn't it?
Yeah, later, when
In
it
fact-
needs to.
No, it's even worse than that. We have been taught by the scriptwriters that in a previous scene, not 10 seconds earlier, was he hiding behind barrels and people kept shooting at the barrels and the barrels would explode.
Yes.
So anyway, we're slowly getting to your thing where there's now a forklift with two barrels and he
A
hides on the
pallet and and he drives the forklift, hiding behind it, up to the wall,
hiding
and
behind
then
the barrels, not the forklift.
As the
hiding behind the barrel, hiding behind the
bad guys
forklift
on the
initially.
second floor.
And then
Yes.
he goes onto the forklift, which automatically rises, and he rides it up, shooting. And now he's hiding right behind behind those barrels, and they
Yes.
get holes shot into them. And then as he jumps off it, he throws one off the thing and causes an explosion because
Yeah.
they explode on impact, not when
when they're shot.
No,
Yes.
not when it doesn't fit the scene.
And there's a cool scene where he freezes some guy. So we've
yes.
just got fire. We've also got freezing.
Yes.
And bodges his pun completely with his Belgian accent.
So what was his pun supposed to be?
Oh, he says,
Remind me.
"Have a nice day."
Told him to
Was that
freeze.
his pun?
That was his pun. Yeah, the guy, his arm is frozen, and
That's
he
right.
says, "Have a nice day," and then kicks him off the thing.
Is that
And I
all he
didn't-
says?
I
Well,
thought those.
have an ice day, right?
God damn
And I
it.
did not get that
I
until
missed
I
it.
later on, when I was second watching, I realized it.
Yeah. I
All right,
missed it.
all through the movie, those puns are awful.
Yes,
They're
they're
just
horrible.
so terrible. I remember, I think in Commando,
Oh, yeah.
where Schwarzenegger's holding a guy
that's
by
top
the
of the
foot
pile.
over the edge.
Yes. Yeah.
And then later, and he drops him. And then later, when the young innocent girl asks him, "What did you do with the guy? Where's he gone?" And Schwarzenegger says, "I let him go." And it's like, that is just like chef's kiss. That is perfect, right? But these ones, they were all
Or Lethal
missed.
Weapon. I nailed him when he killed
Yes.
him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. It's not hard, right? It's not hard. But okay, what was his line again? Can you tell me again?
He says, "Have a nice day,"
Ah,
and he bodges it up with his Belgian accent, so nobody understands it.
Yep.
And then later on, just a minute later, when he's face to face with Tim, he says, "I should have said freeze."
yeah, and again, that's just like swing and a miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Moving on.
Yep. So now comes the betrayal.
Now comes the portrayal. Exactly. So Sarah Fielding, So, he's got the drop on the bad guys and everything's all organized and it's all nice. And then, Sarah comes in and says, ha, 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 ha. And then he says, Van Damme says, puts away his gun and says, right, now we've got you. But then it turns out that Sarah Fielding, she's one of the bad guys.
Mm-hmm. She's a Tim stooge.
So you're watching the movie and you're like, you've already been set up that all of the bad guys are mustache-twirling bad guys and it's all nice and obvious. And then you're hit with this sort of Sarah, but what's the reason? Why?
It's as dusty and see-through as evaporative as her commitment to it, right? She is a bad guy for the 1 second while it needs to be in the script, and immediately does a 180 again and is a good guy again.
Yep.
At the end of the script.
Well, after she gets shot by the bad guy, she has second thoughts of maybe not voting for him.
Maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah, but she has that moment of doubt when he shoots the other guy in the head. And you think,
Yes.
I didn't think you were going to do that.
I thought we were just...
Yeah, I thought we were just messing. No, it turns out we're murdering psychopaths.
So we don't... I never picked up on her motivation for why she wanted to... Why was she a bad guy? I was waiting for the moment where it was like, but he has my child, my beloved, something or other, hostage or... No. She just... Yeah. I don't know.
Again, lazy writing.
About this time in the story, I'm getting more and more confused because not only now do we have double doubles, we have double crossing doubles. So we've got previous Tim, old Tim, new Tim.
Yep.
And now Sarah is like, you don't even kind of know who Sarah is now anymore.
Yep. And Walker leaves her in the past.
So she gets shot.
Why did he shoot her again?
Well, Tim shoots Sarah because he's the bad guy and he shoots people. There's, again, no reason to shoot her at all. She's on his side.
Remember the situation, though. This is at the conclusion of the fight.
Yeah.
Now Tim has the drop on and he's pointing the gun at Sarah, who's on his own side.
Yes.
And Van Damme, who's not on his side, and he shoots Sarah, and then Van Damme runs off.
And then leaves him in the past. He just presses his button and goes back into the Tim goes back to the future and leaves Max in the past alive after shooting his...
Yes.
And then she's dead, or looks dead. Everybody else is dead.
Yep.
And Van Damme flees because the police are coming, so he himself by himself goes, doesn't take her with it, just leaves her lying there in the past. But then in the future decides, nah, I think she's important. I think she's alive. She might be still alive. Let's go back in time. Let's fetch her after all.
Yeah.
That's second thought.
He decides that she's important evidence.
Yeah.
She can testify.
But when we're watching the story...
Because we're still worried about evidence, right? This guy's... I think a senator with a gun shooting at you in a factory is probably evidence enough for you to bring charges. I don't think you need a second witness. I don't think cops work that way.
No.
I can't charge him because the bad guy shot me and I don't have someone else that saw the bad guy shoot me.
Exactly.
Pretty sure
Back
that's
into
enough.
The future, and the future has changed. The whole butterfly effect has kicked in, and now he's in a different future. The senator has all this money, and no one knows what he's talking about. And weirdly,
He still has a job.
well, he still has a job,
He still
and
has
he's
a job.
dismantling the railway while he's there. And they have no idea about the woman he sent back with.
Yeah.
Because in that future, she never joined the TEC. See?
But she's in the past.
Yeah.
Still.
She did go in the past, but it's a different, as you said, it's an alternate future now. It's not the future that
she's
she
still
came
in the
from.
past.
But he goes back to that future,
Yeah.
which is not the future that he came from.
Yeah.
He goes back into the past, and she's still there.
She's
In
still
this
there
future.
because don't.
Tom.
I know.
Yes. Your brain will explode.
No, that's why I turned off 10 minutes
Went
into
back to get
time travel
evidence for
films.
something that he's-
A gentleman, I'll say, time travel films are things I genuinely despise. If they're funny, like Back to the Future, I don't have to think about it, and I can just enjoy the nice writing.
Yep.
But if it's things like this or Tenet, are films that I get genuinely bored with because I cannot invest anything. I cannot invest my brain into the film.
Yep.
There's no humor. It's just serious, or in fact, Tenet is even more brainy. And because they make zero sense and there's no point in getting involved, I don't, right? If I'm not involved in the film, I just sit there and look at my watch and hope that it's finally over soon. And that's what this, oh, good Lord. Primer starts very clever, but then of course it gets so utterly confusing that I have to turn off because I'm not sure if it doesn't make sense or not. But this or Tenet, they absolutely cannot work. It's very obvious how it cannot make any sense. Primer at least tries to do it really justice.
Primer is probably one of the better.
But Primer gets so confusing that I have to step back and have sorry, I don't know. I have no opinion.
Yep.
It could be very, very well thought.
For this movie, the time travel itself is like the floating mountains in
They just do
Avatar.
whatever they like. In this, there's
You
the one
just-
shot
It's a thing.
Yeah.
Get used to it.
in the fight
Right.
that we just had. They wanted
Don't
a
get
cool
stuck
shot.
on the paradigm.
There's
It's just the way it is.
There's two Tims, right? The 84 and 2004 Tim, both in the same factory, and Van Damme is kicking bad guys and kicking the 1994 Tim, the young
the
Tim,
face.
in the face, gives him a gash, and then the future Tim,
Gets
in
an
that
immediate
moment,
scar.
immediately develops a scar.
That was quite
So that
cool.
scar was not always there. It just happened now because this happened in the past. So now future me suddenly gets it.
Yeah.
So it immediately has repercussions. Yet, 5 minutes later, they're in the alternate future where Tim has all the power, and his henchman still has the same bloody nose that he got in the other timeline where Tim did not have the power and was angry at the henchman, so he punched him.
Yeah.
But now he's in a timeline where he just had 10 years of getting all the power.
Yeah.
So henchman was hit in the face for some other reason.
Yes. There
There's
was
no need for him
it
to
was
have a bloody
another
nose.
limousine bashing.
It's immediately contradicting itself.
All right. I think it's time to start to wrap up.
Pull us out of
let's
the
wrap
out of the
up.
rat
Let's
hole.
get
Wrap up this. Now, really, all we've done is we're now 2/3 through the movie, and there's been this big, awesome fight sequence, and now we've got to go through another third of the movie.
Yeah.
And all of the stuff that we've talked about things happening and motivation, it just keeps on going.
Yes.
It just keeps on going and going and going and going. So are there any cool I mean, the bad guys lose, the good guys win, everything kind of gets wrapped up with a nice little bow. Is there anything you guys want to highlight just from the story that you thought was interesting or worth mentioning from that last third? Because otherwise I want to just bring it to a conclusion with some final thoughts.
Well, he does go back. So he lost his wife in 1994. He had 10
Yeah.
years to think about what would I
Yes.
do. You know, he doesn't go back in time to save her, but surely he would think, oh, if I could,
Yeah.
how would I do it?
Well, he actually gets told to by Fielding. Is it Fielding?
Sarah?
Is she that? Yeah, she's the one that got shot.
Yeah.
She puts the idea in his head and said, "Look, everybody's breaking laws and time laws and all the rest of it. Perhaps there's something you need to fix."
Oh, and because he goes back in time to her, he finds, for some reason, he needs to go Sarah Fielding's, get her blood. I don't know.
Well, that's the
understand why.
evidence
Well, evidence for what?
that she's alive. No,
The vial
no,
of her
Tom.
blood?
I know where
Okay,
you're going.
fine. Anyway, he goes to the laboratory, the hospital, finds
Yes.
Sarah Fielding's blood, finds his wife's blood for some coincidence.
Which was right next to it.
Right next to it, which
Yes.
says, "Hey, I'm pregante."
Yeah.
And then he goes and
Because
says, "Oh, my
F for
wife."
Fielding is right next to Walker
Yep,
on the
exactly.
shelf.
Jane Doe, not Fielding, but again,
that's
still,
right.
it's D.
Yeah.
And so he goes, "Oh, I'm going to the mall."
Yeah.
So he heads to the mall to tell his wife, "Hey, let's go to the house where you're gonna get murdered, so
Yeah.
I can put you into danger and
Yes.
use you as bait
Yes.
for the bad guys who I did not count. I'm just assuming they'll come." So he gets the drop on the first bad guy and immediately gets jumped on himself by the second bad guy and could have been shot right there and then.
Yep.
So no plan whatsoever.
Yes.
Just takes his wife home to the house that he
Yes.
knows is going to get attacked, and then just wings it. He just sort of freestyles it.
Yeah.
From there on.
Yep.
There's two Van Dammes now fighting. They missed an opportunity to have two Van Dammes actually fighting side by side.
Yeah.
But and the other weird thing is that she, already in danger, decides in this howling storm, rain and everything, thunder and lightning, in her nightgown, decides to climb onto the roof and hold
Yes.
onto the antenna
Yes.
because that's the safe, that's the place to go.
Much
to go
safer.
up. So there's a few things to talk to through. I think there's bad guys getting dispatched at that point. The house explodes
Yep.
and everything's good. Bad guy. Oh yeah, now the final finale. The bad guys are in the house before it explodes.
Yes.
They have a bomb.
Yes.
Tim comes with a bomb.
No, the
No,
house.
no. This
The
is
house
old.
doesn't explode the second time.
Well, no, Tim
At the
comes. He has
end-
got the bomb in his hand with a counter.
Yeah, but it doesn't explode. Like he goes home to that house later on in the film.
It first
at the-
explodes.
Yeah.
It explodes in the start of the film, but not at the end of the film when he goes back and changes history. Because he goes home to that house.
Still does.
Remember the little kid that runs out?
Yeah, I know, but that's the other thing. I thought the house explodes the second
No,
time.
not the second time.
Oh, it didn't?
No, because how does the bad guy get his
Hang on, what
comeuppance?
happens with the bomb? What happens with the bomb? They have a bomb with a counter with a timer on it.
He might have switched it off.
You
I gotta
don't
watch
switch
that
off
movie
bombs in movies.
Pretty sure he
No,
switched
I
it
thought
off.
the house explodes.
No, the house explodes.
Because he just leaves her
The
gunshot
trick,
body
no, wait.
draped over the old version of
No.
him.
The trick is that there's old evil Tim in the house with the bomb, and then new Tim arrives in the house where the exploding bomb is.
Because
Yes.
Mac's plan, the only plan he had,
See, what-
everything else is winged.
I can explain you what happened.
Go for a Tane.
Please do.
He goes back in time, right, and stops and kills old Tim back in the past, right? So young Tim and old Tim are together in the past, right? He kills both of them at the same time. So old Tim never gets old enough to do any of this stuff.
To the evil
So
stuff.
he can't
That's
send
right.
anybody back
Yes.
to blow up the house.
Yes.
So he never goes back and blows up the house. So he comes back to the future, but now the past has been rewritten.
Yep.
So all those things which led up to this have not happened. So his wife's still alive, the house is still there, she's had the baby. Tim isn't a senator. He disappeared. He does actually say he disappeared.
He left his office one day and
Never
never
came
That's
came.
right. And people barely remember him because he's back in the
So
past.
that's kind of the whole thing. So
All right.
Well, scientifically,
Still
according
not sure
to
what
the
happened to the bomb.
according to the science in the film, how did the bad guy get his comeuppance, Dan?
According to the science in the film, finally,
Which was laid out in the
which was
first
laid
exposition
out,
discussion.
is that you can't have two things occupying the same place at the same time from different timelines.
Yes.
And then old Max Walker pushes young Tim into old Tim, and we get Shoggoth Tim.
And
Cthulhu.
the kick, how good was the action on the kick? He throws
Yes.
him, and then the young Tim goes, oh, turning.
What in the
Not
world?
there yet. Another turn, and I'll make it.
It was terrible
It's
acting.
horrible.
It was really bad. It was one of the worst parts of the action sequence for the whole film.
And the VFX of the end Shoggoth thing kind of left a little bit to be desired.
From
Yeah.
our modern eyes, but for 1994?
Even
Yeah,
from my
1994
1994 eyes.
94, not too bad, but for modern eyes, high school
lots of
grade
eyes.
student work.
There's
Yep.
4 eyes in there.
There were. I think we should, wrap up. This is. I've got a couple of final thoughts here, and I've got I read a few reviews, and I got a couple of quotes that I pulled out of some reviews that I want to read you. So this is one, it's very short. Time travel films have a habit of eventually running into plot holes. But this one has a plot canyon.
It starts with self-contradiction.
But this one has a plot canyon with occasional bits of continuity sticking out of it. And I'd like to credit that to a person called Ben Weber. And I thought
That's nice.
summed it up
Yes.
pretty well.
Well, there's one thing that you guys have to explain to me, and I don't think you can. So Max Walker saved his wife, his pregnant wife.
Right.
And there is young Max and old Max. Now, old Max goes back to the future.
Yes.
In the meantime, young Max and his wife live happily together for 10 years. They have a son, they raise the son has a father.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Mullet Max is in the future.
Yes.
Mullet Max closes his office, takes his car home to his house
To greet the
to
son and
greet
the wife.
the son who he's never seen. A
Well-
stranger comes in and takes the place of your daddy.
I can imagine that young Max
Wait,
went to work that day, right, and didn't come home. Old Max just came home.
no!
That's the only way it can happen.
He was.
Isn't it the only way it could happen?
But what did he do?
Because
at
there's
work?
not two Maxes.
No, why aren't there two Maxes? Where did young Max end up on that
It
day,
wasn't
on that
young
fateful
Max, it was
day?
old Max. He just
Yeah,
aged.
he had grown a mullet too. There's
Yeah.
two mullet. So he goes to work in the morning, but he has no reason to go into a time machine and go back into the time. So what did he do? What happened
He's
to
a
him?
police officer patrolling time, stopping
Yeah,
people from
yeah.
stealing shit. Because
Yeah.
it's still going on. It's just that there isn't a sense of it anymore.
Yep.
So he had for some reason went on a different mission and then never
Yeah,
returned
yeah.
from that.
Or when he returned as old Max.
And the poor child now has a father who has never seen him, who
Yeah.
doesn't remember. That's a messed up ending.
Well, no, the child is fine, right?
That
It's
is-
Max that didn't get to spend 10 years with the
Well,
child.
the kid doesn't know that guy either. It's a complete stranger.
Oh, it's just a different hairdo to him.
It's not. Sorry, this is messed up ending to the film. I felt sorry for the poor wife who has just got the new guy there, even though she just spent 10 years with her husband.
Yep.
Her husband for the last 10 years is now replaced with this guy who just
Yep.
saved her 10 years ago from being killed.
Yep.
He did
No,
so.
the mullet Max should have, I don't know, gone off
Mullet
to,
Max gets
to
a
Greenland.
wife, but the other wife just gets this weirdo who
Yeah.
turns up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's a messed up ending. Sorry.
I think there's one thing that we can guarantee is we should absolutely stay away from time travel films in the future.
Well,
Don't invite me to the shows.
I want to wrap it up with a little thought about that, which is if you're going to have a time travel show, don't have a movie or a story, particularly a movie, don't have a time travel movie where you go back to last Tuesday. Because last Tuesday looks identical to this Tuesday.
Right.
Right? And that's what they were doing in this movie. They were going back from 1994 to 2000 and
They went
whatever.
back to the American Civil War, and they went back to the 1920s briefly, but they didn't really exploit the whole thing about time travel.
Yeah.
And then when you go back to the 1920s or the Civil War, it's obvious. And you're like, okay, now and you're watching the movie and you're like, okay, now we're back in time.
Yeah.
But this one, they jump back a week
Yeah.
and then forward a month.
It's always 10. It's either 1994 or 2004.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating,
So
but
there's-
it didn't look any different. You couldn't
No.
tell.
Yeah.
Well, hairdos.
And the other thing is that they didn't have enough bottom thirds titles to say,
Yes.
you know, a little title,
Yeah.
1994.
Current day.
Yeah, current day.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that
Yeah.
would have really helped.
I think the film also suffered with what Tom touched on before, is that you've got a common character that's jumping around in time. His memory of his life is linear. His memory of his life doesn't jump around in time, right? He was in the first house that blew up because he remembered his wife dying, and then he became a time cop and whatever. And then he goes back, finds out about McComb. McComb dies, then comes home one day, and he's got a 10-year-old son, right? So if you don't take the time to somehow when he came back from that mission. The movie should have ended there. There shouldn't have been the happy ending on the stairs with the bloody 10-year-old kid or anything.
That was kind of the point of it. That was.
Yeah. And I get the Hollywood,
It is difficult to.
to wrap it at that point.
It is.
Yeah. But you get this problem that where are the experiences of that 10 years, right? In between when he saved the day and when he comes back. So you got this linear character that has its own time, and we're following that character, and everybody else's time is all broken up. And snapped in pieces and stuff like that. And that's the usual paradigm with time films, is you've got to follow someone.
Yeah.
You know, Marty McFly.
To hold it together.
Everybody else changes, but Marty McFly's time is linear.
Yeah.
You can get away with it with comedy and crazy professors and 21 gigawatts and stuff like that. And it was written better in, like at least the time machine in Back to the Future travels, and you're still in the time machine when you get to the other side, right? And then it runs out of fuel, you know, and I think they do better things with it, but it does create the same sort of paradigm where everybody else's time's affected, but yours is linear. So what happens to you that's still there, right? All of a sudden that person's gone, and so, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So that that was Timecop. They gave it away in the name that was heavily grounded in time travel, and hence the problems that we had with the film. Now, take the time travel out of it. There's some pretty entertaining sequences in the film. There's some pretty good visual effects in the film. The acting wasn't crazy. I've seen a lot worse Jean-Claude Van Damme acted films. Wasn't. top
Top
rate,
shelf.
but it was a hell of a lot better than the Cannon films that he used to do. It was written quite well as a character piece, but not so much the time thing got in the road. So before we move on to a quick quiz, before we wrap it up, our rating system,
Yes.
buy, borrow, burn. Dan, how do you vote?
I vote that you buy it, but then you go back in time, steal it from yourself, and then burn it.
Prevent yourself from watching it.
Yes, that's right.
And what about you, Tom?
Look, I make no secret that I'm not a fan of time travel movies that take themselves seriously, and this one botched it.
Yeah.
I'm firmly in the burn and avoid watching camp.
Burn for Tom.
Yeah, I think Burn. I mean, I still remember it fondly. It wasn't a bad film to see in the 1990s. It was
Yeah.
a lot of films of this sort of standard, and for those films, the graphics were as good as
Yeah.
the films at the time.
I'd go so far as to say that in the 90s, we were far more forgiving of time travel and were more happy to see the fight sequences and the special effects and things like
time
that.
travel movies never age well. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going forward to the future to 2004. They've got cars which look like, I don't know, triangles with things stuck all over them. Electric doors. I still don't have electric doors.
Those
on my
cars
cars
fitted
now.
into a post-apocalyptic
Actually,
future.
One thing I just want to buy about his car. He has a car that does maybe 30 miles an hour. And it's got a massive, great spoiler on the back.
Yeah.
Obviously, to create downdraft. He doesn't need any downdraft. That
No.
car is not going to be
No,
taking off anytime soon.
no. It's they missed a few opportunities, I think. All right, so I it's a burn for me as well.
You know what? I was just going to say, the problem with this film is it's neither terrible nor good. It's a very...
I agree with that.
I put it in the uncanny valley sort of.
It's just there.
sort of thing.
It's just not interesting. It's
Yep.
one of those films that was okay at the time.
Yep.
It's not worth looking out for because it's terribly bad.
Yes,
It's not terribly good.
I agree.
It's
I
just very
absolutely
meh.
agree with that.
It's just a very meh film.
It's close to good.
Yes.
You can
Yeah.
see they're up the street from good.
I think it saw the success it saw because of the landscape it was in at the time.
Yeah.
Both landscape, the time landscape, and the where Hollywood was at the time.
This is 1994. 1992 was Terminator 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
Were there any other time travel films that this might have been riding the wave of in those days?
There was probably a few.
Bill and Ted? When was Bill and Ted?
Yeah,
That was sort of that time as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah, mid
Ted was
'90s
that
would
time,
probably
yeah.
probably be around there. And I think you can
Time Bandits was
religiously
a bit earlier than this, wasn't it? Time Bandits.
Time
Bandits
Bandits.
was late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think you can almost guarantee that at least once a year, some producer takes some time travel movie to the masses.
Gives it a shot.
Yeah, this film it cost 27 million budget, grossed 101 million worldwide at the box office, and I think that sort of speaks to that as well. That it was the landscape that we were in. We were seeing Stallone movies. Cobra was around that time, which also has a terrible story, but it was a big action
Die
piece.
Hard was around this
Yeah.
time as well, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Die
I
Hard
believe
1
so.
and Die Hard 1, 2 and 3 were around
I
this
think
sort
in
of
the
time.
cinema it
Yeah.
would have fared better.
Yep.
It's got a lot of big spectacle and there's
Yeah.
explosions and there's big thump.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's all that sort of stuff. So
It had a 12 million opening weekend, so it saw some good
Wow.
marketing.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive for that time, given that its gross US Canada takings was 44 million. They made a quarter of that in the first week, in the first opening weekend. So it got a big treatment. I think, Hyams, Tom, did you see anything else that he directed?
Oh yeah, he did Outland with Sean Connery,
Oh, that
the
was
science
not
fiction
bad.
one.
Oh, yeah.
He did 2010, the day we made contact.
Mm-hmm.
So what else? Directed by. So those are the big ones that I remember. Peter Hyams.
And I think you mentioned earlier that he does like to do some of his own cinematography.
Yeah,
There was some
he's
good
credited in
cinematography
this
in the
film.
film.
I thought it was photographed
Visually, it was
really
yes,
nicely.
Yes, I believe so as well. You
You
know,
know?
that opening sequence in the rain with the bad guy and stuff. It was really
End of
nicely
Days.
shot.
He did that terrible Schwarzenegger film, End of Days.
Oh, okay.
Around
Well,
1999.
Isn't that another
Well, it's a Y2K thing.
loose paradigm type thing where they were cloning or something like that? Wasn't
that
End
was
of Days was cloning?
End of Days was the devil
No,
taking
End of
over.
Days
This is
was
the Antichrist coming.
Was it?
I
Yeah,
think you're thinking of Sixth Day.
maybe.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
where
that's
It
it.
was the cloning one. There was a
Yep.
few shots.
Where they had the railgun and crazy Kane. What's his name? Who's the guy from The Godfather? The son.
I know.
He was the bad guy in it.
Yeah.
He was a bit crazy in that film.
None of these films are appallingly bad.
They're a victim of their
You're getting-
of their time.
You're getting that confused with another one again.
Well, I owned this. I owned
the
this
railgun
film.
was a different one again. That was.
That was the one with the cloning, wasn't it? The railgun.
The Railgun might be a different one. I don't know.
It's too many Schwarzenegger films.
There
maybe.
is. They start to
Starts
blur.
with R. It's got a single name. Starts with R. Regurgitator.
Yeah. This film, I owned it on Laserdisc at one point. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a spectacular film at the time, and I really did enjoy it. But then watching it a couple of weeks ago,
I've seen it on Laserdisc at my mate's house. you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
He was-
Eraser.
yeah.
You're thinking
Uh,
of
Eraser,
Eraser
yes.
is the railgun.
That's the one with the railgun.
And then he did End of Days, and then also he did the Sixth Day, which I think is the cloning one.
Yeah,
Yes.
6 Days of Cloning.
Whereas a
Yeah.
chopper pilot or something, and that's got a little bit of this.
You see, I think Van Damme is a bit of a Schwarzenegger wannabe.
Absolutely.
See, that's the thing he's going for. He never he doesn't have the
Yep.
charisma.
Yeah.
Strange talking about Schwarzenegger with charisma.
And he was created,
Yeah,
but
yes, yeah.
Charisma.
He was
Yes.
created
Don't become
by-
governor if you.
we did a show. There's a show way back in the Voyage of the Geek archives, in the first 10 shows that we did. We did a show and we dedicated it to Canon Films. And when they found Van Damme, they were trying to create a Stallone.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
But he just doesn't have the charisma that.
No.
I mean, people take the mickey out of Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
But he does have a certain stage presence. This guy doesn't have any stage presence.
No.
He's just
One
sort of
interesting thing I learned
bumbling
about
his way through it.
Yeah.
a little connection
Yeah.
between Van Damme and Schwarzenegger is that Van Damme was cast as the Predator. For Predator.
He was too, yes, in the Predator film, to
In
wear the suit.
To wear the suit, and he kept complaining about the suit not being comfortable, and also you can't see my face.
Yeah.
And he eventually
How
walked
am I
away
going to
from
do
it.
the splits?
I've got to do the nude shot and the split
Well, that's
shot.
why they wanted him. They wanted his athleticism to make the alien look all weird and flexible, and that's why they cast him. But he walked off the set and then was replaced by somebody who's more bulky and
Yeah,
was more
big
like a
guy.
weird
Huge
thing,
guy.
Yeah,
That guy's like 6'7" or something, and perfectly proportioned. He's not like a skinny 6'7". He's like completely perfectly proportioned human, but just monstrously large. Huge hands, shoulders this wide. He played Harry and the Hendersons. He played the Bigfoot in Harry and the Hendersons.
poor actor always gets roles where his
Yes,
Doesn't show his
freakish
face.
nature is
Just
made
shows
even
his
more
height.
freakish.
monstrously
Okay.
large. All right, let's move on to some quiz, gentlemen. We have some rules. We've got some new buzzer technology. There's been a massive campaign to level the playing field. And so we've invested in a new buzzer technology. If you buzz in,
Dan's lawyers spoke to you,
Yes.
did they?
if
Yes.
you buzz it, the biggest problem I used to have is that I could never hear your individual buzzer noises because they had to come through this microphone for me to hear them. I couldn't. So now I can actually see who buzzes in first. And if you get the question wrong, you'll be locked out of the quiz, and the remaining two people will be able to buzz in. First person to buzz in can answer the question. Any questions? We're good?
Good.
All right. Sorry about the noise. There we go. And I'll mute it so that... Okay, we're ready to go. First question. What type of shop is Walker's wife? Tony.
Oh, do we not have to wait? Oh,
It's a clock shop.
I was going to say that even before you were going
Yeah,
to say
I'm
it.
the clockmaker, so
You are
I'm
the
going to get this right. It's probably the only one I want people to know. In a previous life, I was an horologist, a clockmaker. So I have a particular interest in this. I deserve the point.
Nice. You certainly deserve a point. And I did neglect to mention, now that we do have the new buzzer system, you can buzz in early.
Oh, it can buzz in early. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Let me
And we,
just-
we don't see the questions anymore on the
And-
screen either.
Yes, these are all efforts to level the playing field, because Tom normally finds some advantage in the system. Resetting the buzzers. They should all be green. Yes.
Yep.
What brand of boots does Walker wear? Tom.
Wolverine.
Wolverine is correct. Question 3. To arrest his ex-partner, what year did Walker travel to? Tom,
1929. 3rd of October, I think.
correct. 2 points to Tommy.
30th, not 3rd. 30th.
So you give me the month. I didn't even have the month down here.
I'm not sure if the month is right. I know the 30th, and I know that 1929 is correct.
Question 4. Which political party was granted campaign federal matching funds? Tony.
White supremacy.
Yes, he's correct. And you only heard it on the
Yeah, that was
radio
in
in
the
the
background.
background or the
Yep.
TV in the background.
That actually did strike me as kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Predictive, this idea, because that is what happens, of course, and that's kind of where we are with American politics now. You know,
Yep.
It's kind of,
Yep. It was
been like it was then. I mean, it really hasn't changed.
I think we might actually be living in a time already.
All right, question number 5. Name 2 future tech predictions the film got right. Dan.
Haha. VR, not safe for work, metaverse, pornography.
That's one.
Oh, shit. And I don't have the second one.
Future technology.
All right, I'm going to lock you out.
And does
Okay,
does it
Dan's
have
locked
to-
out. Tom,
Does it have to be technology that is being developed or fully functional? Because I would say self-driving cars.
name 2 future tech predictions the filmmakers got right.
I think
You
self-driving cars.
can't use the VR porn. Self-driving cars. One more.
Oh, and I can't reuse the
No.
VR porn.
No. It's tough.
Oh,
Computer chips?
well, they were
No.
already around.
No.
They were already there.
Nothing.
I'm going to have to lock you out.
Yeah, lock me out then.
Tony, it's all yours now.
But you have to say 2 now as well.
And you can't use
Can't use any of those.
the VR
They
porn.
It's harder and harder.
Google Home, basically, right? Because he walks in and he says,
Yes.
put the television on.
Voice-activated television.
Facing television.
You'll kill yourself when I tell you the other one.
I don't know.
Automated cars? We've done all of the obvious ones.
He had a voice-operated hand mobile device.
Ah.
Oh, he did, and he put it in his pocket, didn't he?
Yeah, remember he was in the
Yeah.
in the phone box and he asked it, name Jane Doe's shot in the
okay, voice recognition.
yeah.
He had a mobile phone.
He had a mobile phone.
We each got one.
Yeah.
So
I
third of a
can,
point each or no points is
points.
how it's
Can
going to go.
tell a little anecdote about the VR porn that I don't know if it's true or not, but the film crew that was sent off to film the scene that the guys watches were supposed to film beavers. We were supposed to watch a documentary on beavers, according to the script.
Oh really?
And the guys who were sent off with the camera, they got drunk and ended up spending the night at a strip club. And when they woke up the next morning, they had missed their bus to go out to the sanctuary where the beavers cavorted. And they said, "Well, we just met this stripper. Let's go and ask her if she will do something for us." And they
Wow.
filmed her and put that in the film instead.
Wow.
We did see her beaver.
Yes, there was.
They did answer the brief.
So
They
because
got there in the end.
it's so weird. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what the interwebs.
They answered the brief.
Mm-hmm.
All
It
right.
should be true if it isn't.
Question number 6. Which sport is played by a famous Australian sporting icon who shares the main character's name?
I don't know a lot about sport, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm
famous
just gonna-
Australian sportsman.
I'm just gonna buzz in and say cricket
I was going to say
because
cricket.
there's a
Tom has buzzed in and got the correct answer.
Damn it.
Max Walker, I believe, was captain of Australia at one point. He's a very famous Australian cricketer. But if you were around, you might have seen there was a series of TV commercials with Max Walker and his little other cricketer offsider where they're out in a boat. The boat capsizes. They're always
These from
ribbing
the
each other.
70s or something or other.
Max Walker was from the 80s.
Okay.
70s, 80s. But yeah, he was an 80s cricketer.
Max Walker is an actual person.
Max Walker is a famous Australian cricketer. Played in the same era as who's the British, the English captain, Botham.
Both of them, yeah.
Played in the same era as Botham, Lilly,
Okay.
This is very unfair because I wasn't in Australia in the 80s, so there's no.
It was a
Well,
difficult
neither
challenge
was
for
I.
you, yes. But I thought
But
you
I knew the
might have,
answer.
as an Englishman, you might have known.
Both of me, obviously. But
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Question number 7. What was the name of the computer genius?
Mr. Soon Dead.
The computer genius who was like watching the not safe for work
Yes.
VR metaverse.
Oh, not the guy who
experience.
got shot in the face.
No.
Not the microchip guy.
The guy that worked for the cops.
Oh, yeah, they didn't mention his name.
He's got 2 names in the film, but both of them are the same name.
Yeah, they shortened it, but I can't remember what shortened it to.
No idea.
No.
No takers?
Nah.
If I catch you fucking this machine again, Ricky, the boss slaps him on the back of the head from the Beaver VR experience. So Richard or Ricky. Which meal did director
They should have called him
Matuzak's
Sticky
wife?
after that.
Do you want me to start again?
Yes, please. Sorry
Which
to interrupt.
meal?
Hungarian goulash.
I believe it's just goulash, but I believe that is Hungarian. So yes,
okay.
you give me too much information, but I'll accept it, Dan.
I get one. I got one.
Question number 9. Where was the time travel prototype device located?
Portland?
Tom, yes.
Portland? New...
No,
Jersey?
incorrect.
Okay.
You're out. Tony,
Wyoming.
you're out. It's all yours, Dan.
That's the other movie.
Well, that only leaves Montana.
So-
No, it was right next to Washington. They say within
Yes.
stone throw of Washington.
It's Maryland.
Ah.
Or Maryland. I think they call it Maryland. They sort of drop the Y, but it's Maryland. It was actually Calverton, Maryland.
Oh, Calverton, of course.
That's the epiphany moment when the boss works, when the director works out that, oh, damn, they've got the machine.
Yeah, that's why we exist.
Question number 10. What location was the Confederate gold stolen from?
Gettysburg.
Dan, incorrect.
The only Confederate thing I can link with Confederacy is Gettysburg.
So Dan's out.
But
I don't know, but it was for General Lee. But
It was
I think
Southern
I
gold,
remember.
yep.
But
Richmond.
Atlanta. Atlanta, Georgia.
If you can offer a more accurate... no, I'm tempted to give it to Tom. It was Gainesville, Georgia. So at least you're in the
I
right...
did say Atlanta though.
You're in the
Well,
right
it's
state.
The right state.
Well, I had the right first letter.
Yeah. And
No,
the
that
right
doesn't count.
Continent.
That doesn't count. Because it did actually show it. It was the very first
Why does
lower...
distance
It was the
count?
very first lower third for the film.
Does it say Georgia on
It
the
says
thing?
Gainesville, Georgia,
Gainesville,
and
Georgia.
then
Okay,
gives
it
you a
says-
time, gives you a date. Okay, bonus. Oh, well, there's no point in asking this because I don't think anyone's going to get it. But this is the bonus
Triple
point.
points.
Triple points
All right.
bonus.
Lay it on me.
In what year was the Confederate gold stolen?
1829.
No.
Okay, Dan's out.
Later than that.
Correct century, though.
I thought it was in the 1870s, but I cannot give you the year.
Are you
Oh, it is probably later than that. It's 1865, my second guess.
So,
Closest, I'm going to say 1874.
yeah, we'll go closest to the number. So you're 18.
65.
74.
72.
Oh, bastard.
Dan gets the bickies. It was 1863. So you were 1 year off.
Yeah, I know my stuff.
Well done.
All right, gentlemen. That brings us to the end of another journey into the cult films of yesteryear and today. And Timecop, probably not recommended, other than if you want to go down a rabbit hole of paradigm-twisting mayhem. And, of course, if you like Jean-Claude Van Damme doing the splits, getting in his undies and kicking some people around the stage, not that bad if that's your want. That's it for another episode of Voyage of the Geek. Until next time, it's bye for me.
Bye also from me.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Bye-bye.
What is your industry? How many of you are there?